The biggest love stories rarely begin with destiny. They begin with a mistake. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers spilled across the marble floors of the Blackwell estate, turning every polished surface into gold. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway outside, and inside, America's wealthiest families mingled beneath towering arrangements of white roses. Olivia Carter stood frozen near the entrance, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She did not belong here. Her simple navy dress had come from a clearance rack 3 years ago. Her shoes had survived countless shifts at the flower shop. And yet somehow, tonight, she was expected to walk into one of the most exclusive family gatherings in New York. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her best friend, Madison. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. Minor accident. I'm okay, but I'm stuck at the hospital for observation. Please cover for me. Just explain everything when you get there." Olivia closed her eyes. Madison worked for an elite event planning company and had spent months organizing tonight's gathering. The last thing Olivia wanted was to attend alone, but she couldn't abandon her friend when everything depended on this event going smoothly. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The scent of fresh flowers instantly calmed her. At least those made sense. Flowers were her world. People were harder. Billionaires were impossible. She had barely taken 10 steps when a sharply dressed woman hurried toward her with obvious relief. "Thank goodness you're here," the woman said. "Mr. Blackwell has been waiting." Olivia blinked. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," but the woman was already guiding her through the crowd. "Everyone's been asking when you'd arrive. Come quickly." Olivia's stomach dropped. Waiting? For her? Before she could protest again, conversations began stopping around her. Heads turned. Curious smiles appeared. Several guests whispered to one another. She suddenly felt like an actress who had wandered onto the wrong movie set. Then she saw him. Ethan Blackwell stood near a grand fireplace, nearly 6 feet 3 inches tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was neatly styled, his posture confident, but his expression suggested he would rather be anywhere else. The moment their eyes met, the room seemed to disappear. Olivia stopped walking. Ethan frowned slightly. She clearly wasn't the woman he had expected. She saw the realization flash across his face instantly. He knew something was wrong. Good, she thought. He'll fix this. Instead, Ethan simply studied her. "You're late," he said calmly. Olivia opened her mouth. "Actually, I'm not. Traffic?" he asked. She stared at him. This was his chance. One sentence could end the confusion. But he said nothing. Around them, relieved family members smiled. The tension in the room seemed to evaporate. Ethan glanced at the crowd, then back at Olivia. For reasons he didn't fully understand, he decided not to correct anyone. Not yet. And in that single moment, a harmless misunderstanding quietly became the beginning of a story neither of them would ever forget. Olivia could feel dozens of eyes following her as she stood beside Ethan Blackwell near the fireplace. Every instinct told her to explain the misunderstanding, but before she could speak, an older woman wearing an elegant emerald gown appeared and wrapped her in a warm embrace. "We have been waiting to meet you," the woman said. "Ethan never brings anyone." Olivia glanced helplessly toward Ethan. Surely now he would tell everyone the truth. Instead, he simply lifted a glass of sparkling water and said, "Mother, this is Olivia." That was all. No explanation. No correction. Just Olivia. The woman smiled even wider. What a lovely name. Olivia forced a polite smile while her heart pounded. This was getting completely out of control. Throughout the evening, guests continued approaching them. Business leaders, family friends, socialites whose jewelry probably cost more than her apartment building. Everyone seemed delighted by her presence. Even more confusing, they all seemed relieved. As if Ethan introducing a woman into his life was some kind of miracle. During dinner, Olivia finally found a moment alone with him on a terrace overlooking the city lights. The cool evening air felt like freedom. "Okay," she whispered, turning toward him. "You know they have the wrong idea." Ethan rested his hands against the railing. "I do. And you are not planning to fix it?" "Not immediately." Olivia stared at him. "Why?" For the first time, something that looked almost like amusement appeared in his eyes. "Because everyone in that room has spent months trying to arrange my future. And you are the first interesting thing that has happened all year." Olivia blinked. That was not the answer she expected. She folded her arms. I am a florist, not an actress. Good, Ethan replied. I dislike actresses. She tried not to smile. Somehow, despite the ridiculous situation, he was making it difficult to stay annoyed. A comfortable silence settled between them as they looked out across Manhattan. The skyline glittered beneath the night sky like thousands of tiny stars. So you really work with flowers? Ethan asked. Every day. Her face brightened instantly. Best job in the world. Better than running a corporation? Definitely. He laughed quietly. The sound surprised both of them. Olivia noticed how different he seemed away from the crowd. Less intimidating. Less polished. More human. You love it that much? He asked. I do. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook filled with sketches, flower arrangements, shop ideas, dream layouts for a future studio she hoped to open someday. Ethan flipped through several pages. Each drawing was detailed and full of life. You drew all of these? Whenever I have free time. He looked at her for a long moment. Most people showed him investment plans, profit projections, ambition wrapped in numbers. Olivia showed him flowers and dreams. Before she could take the notebook back, a sudden burst of laughter echoed from inside the estate. Ethan's family was looking for them again. Neither of them noticed how natural it felt when they walked back inside together. The evening should have ended when the guests began leaving. But somehow Olivia found herself still at the estate nearly an hour later. Staff members moved quietly through the grand halls, clearing glasses and gathering decorations while soft piano music drifted through. Hidden speakers. She was helping reorganize several floral centerpieces when she noticed Ethan watching her from across the room. Not in the way wealthy men sometimes looked at beautiful things they could buy. There was genuine curiosity in his expression, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. Olivia carefully adjusted a cluster of white roses. You know, most people spend parties avoiding work, Ethan said as he approached. Most people are not responsible for keeping flowers alive, she replied. Fair point. A small smile appeared between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a tiny object made of green thread and woven leaves. It was simple, handmade, almost childish. Ethan glanced down at it. What is that? A 4-leaf clover bracelet. That does not look expensive. Good thing I am not selling it. Ethan laughed quietly. Olivia surprised herself by liking the sound. My grandmother taught me how to make these when I was 8 years old, she explained. Whenever someone important in my life was nervous, she would make one and say luck works better when you share it. Ethan looked at the bracelet in her hand. And you think I am nervous? I think you spent half the evening pretending not to be. For a second, he looked genuinely caught off guard. Then he lowered his eyes. You notice more than people expect. Comes with working around flowers. You learn to pay attention. Olivia extended the bracelet toward him. Here. Ethan stared at it. You are giving this to me? Unless billionaires are allergic to good luck. He hesitated before accepting it. The woven green band looked strangely out of place against his expensive watch. Yet somehow it felt more valuable. Thank you, he said quietly. Something softened in his voice. Something real. Olivia suddenly felt awkward and turned away. Do not make a big deal out of it. Too late. The following morning she expected the strange chapter of her life to be over. Instead, while arranging tulips inside the flower shop, her phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Curious, she answered. Hello. You forgot something. Her breath caught. Immediately. Ethan. What? A proper goodbye. Olivia rolled her eyes despite smiling. I think we survived without one. I disagree. Silence lingered for a moment. Then Ethan spoke again. Lunch. Today. 1 o'clock. Was that a question? Not really. She laughed before she could stop herself. Customers glanced over. You are very confident. Usually. His voice lowered slightly. But not about this. Olivia looked down at a bouquet of sunflowers resting on the counter. For reasons she could not explain, her heart suddenly felt lighter. Outside, sunlight poured through the shop windows. Inside, she found herself saying yes before logic had a chance to intervene. Neither of them realized that one simple lunch would begin changing everything. At exactly 1 o'clock, Olivia stood outside a small diner overlooking the Hudson River, wondering why a man like Ethan Blackwell would choose a place like this. It certainly was not the kind of restaurant she imagined billionaires visiting. Through the window, she spotted him sitting in a corner booth, wearing a simple navy sweater instead of an expensive suit. For the first time, He looked less like someone who ran an empire and more like an ordinary man enjoying a quiet afternoon. As soon as she entered, he stood and pulled out her chair. "You are on time," he said. "You sound surprised." "Most people keep me waiting." Olivia smiled. "Maybe that is because most people are afraid of you." Ethan actually laughed. "Is that your professional opinion?" "No, that is my florist opinion." Lunch stretched far longer than either expected. They talked about everything except money. Olivia shared stories about difficult customers who insisted blue roses existed naturally. Ethan told her about accidentally getting lost during a business trip in Montana and ending up helping a rancher repair a fence for half a day. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her iced tea. Hours seemed to disappear. After lunch, Ethan surprised her again. "Come with me." "That sounds suspicious." "Trust me." 20 minutes later, they were walking through a public botanical garden on the edge of the city. Spring flowers painted the landscape with color. Tulips, hydrangeas, lilies, and thousands of roses stretched across rolling paths. Olivia stopped moving entirely. "This is incredible." Ethan watched her rather than the flowers. The excitement in her eyes was impossible to miss. She moved from garden to garden like a child discovering a hidden world. At one point, she knelt beside a rare variety of rose and gently touched a petal. "One day," she said softly, "I want a flower studio with gardens like this." Ethan remembered every word. As the afternoon faded into evening, they left the gardens and wandered through city streets. Despite all the luxury available to him, Ethan seemed happiest doing simple things with her. They stopped at a hot dog cart near Central Park. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "This is dinner?" "The owner makes the best hot dogs in Manhattan." "That is a bold claim." 5 minutes later, she admitted he was right. They sat on a nearby bench watching people pass by beneath golden sunlight. No reporters, no board meetings, no expectations. Just two people talking. Ethan glanced down at the green bracelet still wrapped around his wrist. He had not removed it once. Olivia noticed. "Looks like the luck is working." He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Maybe it is." Something shifted between them then. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just the quiet realization that neither wanted the day to end. When Olivia finally checked her phone, she froze. Nearly 6 hours had passed. Yet somehow it felt like only minutes. And for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwell found himself looking forward to tomorrow more than any business deal waiting on his desk. Over the next several weeks, Olivia and Ethan slipped into a rhythm neither of them had planned. What began as a misunderstanding slowly became the part of their day they looked forward to most. Some mornings Ethan would stop by the flower shop carrying coffee. Other afternoons, he would find excuses to call her that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with hearing her voice. Olivia noticed something changing in him. The man who always seemed calm and untouchable around other people became surprisingly relaxed around her. He laughed more, smiled more. Sometimes he even teased her. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Olivia invited Ethan into the small flower shop after a sudden storm soaked the streets outside. Water tapped softly against the windows while warm yellow lights filled the room. Ethan watched her arrange fresh peonies and roses behind the counter. "You really love this place," he said. Olivia glanced around the modest shop. "It is not much." "That is not what I asked." She smiled. "Then yes, I do." Ethan nodded slowly. "I can tell." She looked at him curiously. "How?" "Because every time you talk about flowers, your entire face changes." Olivia laughed. "That sounds ridiculous." "It is true." For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then she noticed the bracelet still wrapped around his wrist. The green threads had faded slightly from daily wear. "You still have it." Ethan followed her gaze. "Of course. Most people would have thrown it away by now." "I am not most people." The answer warmed her more than she expected. Later that evening, after the shop closed, they walked through the city together beneath umbrellas. The sidewalks reflected colorful lights from storefronts and passing cars. It should have been an ordinary walk. Instead, it felt important. At one point, Ethan stopped beside a bookstore. Through the window, Olivia spotted a collection of floral design books she had admired for months. Before she could say anything, Ethan was already opening the door. "You do not have to buy me anything," she protested. "Good." He held the door open. "Because I am buying books." She rolled her eyes but followed him inside. As they wandered through the shelves, Olivia caught herself watching him when he was not looking. There was still so much she did not know about him. Yet somehow she trusted him more each day. Ethan felt it too. The truth was that Olivia had become the one place in his life where nobody expected anything from him. She did not care about power. She never asked about investments. She never tried to impress him. Around her, he could simply be Ethan. One evening, while sitting together on a quiet bench overlooking the river, Ethan finally spoke about something he rarely discussed. When my father died, everyone expected me to become him. Olivia remained silent, letting him continue. I spent years trying not to disappoint people. He stared out at the water. After a while, you forget what you actually want. Olivia gently touched his arm. Maybe you just have not met the right people yet. Ethan turned toward her. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. And for the first time, both of them began wondering whether what they felt was becoming something far more dangerous than friendship. 2 days later, Olivia stood inside the grand ballroom of the newly renovated Aurora Hotel, carefully adjusting the final floral arrangement near the stage. The event was the biggest assignment her flower shop had ever received. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Hundreds of guests filled the room. Journalists moved between tables. Business leaders gathered near the front rows. Everything felt larger than life. Olivia stepped back to admire her work and smiled. She had spent nearly a week preparing every centerpiece. Tonight could open doors she had only dreamed about. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Running late. Save me a seat. She laughed softly and slipped the phone back into her purse. Even after weeks together, she still knew very little about his professional life. Whenever conversations drifted toward work, Ethan usually redirected them toward her dreams instead. She had never pushed for answers. She never felt the need to. Suddenly the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. Conversations faded into silence. The event host stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this historic evening. Applause filled the ballroom. Olivia continued organizing a few flowers near the back while half listening. Then the host spoke again. Tonight would not be possible without the vision of one extraordinary leader. More applause erupted. Please welcome the founder, chairman, and Chief Executive Officer of Blackwell Global Enterprises, Mr. Ethan Blackwell. Olivia froze. The flower stem slipped from her fingers. For a moment, she thought she had heard the wrong name. Then Ethan walked onto the stage. The entire room rose to its feet. Hundreds of people applauded. Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom. Giant screens displayed photographs of Ethan standing beside world leaders, cutting ribbons at international projects, appearing on magazine covers she had seen countless times at grocery store checkout lines. Her heartbeat stopped. No, it could not be. The man who bought hot dogs from street vendors. The man who spent afternoons wandering botanical gardens. The man who wore her handmade bracelet every day. He was not simply successful. He was one of the most powerful business figures in America. Olivia stared at the stage in disbelief. Ethan's eyes swept across the audience. For one brief second, he found her. The smile on his face disappeared instantly. He knew. He knew she had finally learned the truth. Around her, guests whispered excitedly. Blackwell built a fortune worth billions. Youngest chairman in company history. One of the most influential executives in the country. Every word felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, dozens of unanswered questions rushed through her mind. Why had he hidden this? Why had he never told her? Why had he allowed her to believe he was just an ordinary businessman? Ethan began speaking from the stage, but Olivia could not hear a single word. The room seemed distant, blurred. Her chest tightened with confusion and betrayal. Without thinking, she turned and walked toward the ballroom exit. Behind her, Ethan continued speaking to the crowd. But the moment he saw Olivia disappear through the doors, he realized the secret he had protected for weeks had just cost him the one person he never wanted to lose. Olivia did not stop walking until she reached the quiet sidewalk outside the hotel. The cool night air hit her face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside her chest. Every memory from the past few weeks replayed differently now. The lunches, the long conversations, the walks through the city, the moments when she thought she was getting to know a man who trusted her. Suddenly, they felt wrapped in questions she could not answer. Her phone began vibrating almost immediately. Ethan. She ignored it. Seconds. Later it rang again. Then again. Finally, she silenced the device and slipped it into her purse. Across town, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the small four-leaf clover sketch she had doodled inside her notebook weeks earlier. The bracelet. He had worn it every day. The thought should have comforted her. Instead it hurt. If he trusted her enough to wear something so personal, why had he never trusted her with the truth? The following morning the flower shop felt unusually quiet. Olivia buried herself in work. Roses, tulips, hydrangeas, anything to keep her mind occupied. Around noon, the front door opened. Her heart immediately jumped before she even looked up. Ethan stood there. For the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. Olivia set down a bundle of flowers without speaking. Ethan approached slowly. "Olivia," she continued, arranging stems. "You should not be here. Please let me explain." "Explain what?" she asked quietly. "Explain why you never told me who you really are? Explain why every person in New York seemed to know except me." Ethan took a breath. "I never meant to hurt you." Olivia laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what hurts the most?" Ethan remained silent. "I never cared about your money." Her eyes finally met his. Not once. The truth in her voice landed harder than any accusation. Ethan looked away briefly. "I know." "Then why?" For several seconds he struggled to answer. "Because every time someone learns who I am, everything changes." Olivia crossed her arms. "You did not even give me the chance." Ethan could not argue with that. She was right. "I was selfish," he admitted. "For the first time in years, someone treated me like a normal person. I did not want that to end." The honesty in his voice shook her resolve for a moment. But another thought hurt even more. "Was I ever supposed to be there?" she asked quietly. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "That night at your family's gathering. I was not the woman they expected." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was just filling in for someone else." Ethan's expression changed immediately. "Olivia, I think that is the part one cannot forget." She looked down at the flowers between them. "I was never the person anyone chose." The words hung heavily in the air. Ethan stared at her, realizing this was not only about his secret anymore. It was about something much deeper. Before he could respond, Olivia stepped back. "I need time." Ethan wanted to fight for her. He wanted to explain everything. But the pain in her eyes stopped him. Slowly he nodded. Then he walked toward the door. As he left, neither of them noticed that the green bracelet remained firmly wrapped around his wrist, refusing to let go even when everything else seemed to be slipping away. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. Then 6. Autumn slowly painted New York in shades of gold and amber. But for Olivia, the days felt strangely colorless. She focused on work, poured herself into every bouquet, every arrangement, every customer who walked through the shop door. Yet no matter how busy she stayed, certain memories refused to fade. The botanical garden, the hot dog cart, the river at sunset. Most of all, the look on Ethan's face when he realized she was leaving. Meanwhile, Ethan threw himself into work with a determination that worried everyone around him. Board meetings stretched late into the night. Business trips multiplied, yet nothing distracted him for long. Every morning, he still glanced at the green bracelet on his wrist. Every evening, he found himself thinking about the woman who had made him feel more understood in a few weeks than anyone else had in years. One afternoon, Ethan stood inside a conference room overlooking Manhattan while executives discussed a merger worth billions of dollars. The presentation continued, but his attention drifted toward a sketch resting beside his notebook. It was not a business plan. It was a rough drawing of a flower studio. Olivia's dream. Suddenly, he realized something. He had spent his entire life building things for investors, shareholders, and expectations. He had never once built something for the person he loved. 2 months later, Olivia received an elegant invitation delivered by courier. No sender, no explanation, only an address and a time. Curiosity eventually won. On Saturday morning she arrived at a quiet street in Brooklyn where an old brick building stood behind a row of maple trees. The structure looked completely transformed. Fresh windows reflected sunlight. New landscaping surrounded the entrance. A crowd had gathered outside. Olivia frowned in confusion. Then she noticed a ribbon stretched across the front doors. A grand opening. Before she could ask questions, someone handed her a brochure. Her eyes immediately widened. Printed across the front page were 3 words. Olivia Bloom Studio. Her breath caught. Slowly she looked up. The building. The gardens. The greenhouse visible through the glass walls. Every detail matched sketches she had once shown Ethan inside her notebook. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Then she saw him standing near the entrance. Ethan looked nervous, more nervous than the night they first met. He stepped forward. "You said nobody ever chose you," he said softly. Olivia could barely speak. "Ethan," he shook his head gently. "I need you to see something." He opened the front doors. Inside stood the flower studio she had imagined for years but never believed she could afford. Every room reflected her dream. Every detail came from conversations he had quietly remembered. And in that moment, Olivia finally understood. Ethan had not built a building. He had built proof that she had always mattered far more than any secret, any fortune, or any mistake that first brought them together. Olivia stood in the center of the studio, surrounded by flowers she had once only imagined in sketches. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, painting the room with warmth and color. For several seconds, she could not speak. Ethan remained a few feet away, giving her space, allowing her to take everything in. Finally, she turned toward him. "You remembered all of it." Ethan smiled softly. Every conversation, every drawing, every dream. Olivia felt tears gathering in her eyes. "You built this for me." "No," he replied quietly. "I built it because you stopped believing someone would choose you." The words struck directly at her heart. Months of hurt, confusion, and doubt suddenly felt smaller than the truth. Standing before her, Ethan had listened. He had remembered. And most importantly, he had acted. Slowly, they walked through the studio together. Every corner reflected a piece of her story. The design room, the greenhouse, the workshop space, even a small reading nook filled with floral design books. Ethan had somehow transformed memories into reality. As they reached the central garden courtyard, Olivia noticed a glass display resting beneath a flowering arch. Her steps slowed. Inside the display case sat something very familiar. A simple green bracelet woven from thread and clover leaves. The bracelet she had given him months ago, the one he never stopped wearing. Ethan carefully opened the case and lifted it into his hands. "Do you remember what you told me when you gave this to me?" Olivia nodded faintly. "Luck works better when you share it." Ethan smiled. "I did not believe in luck before I met you." His voice grew quieter. Then one misunderstanding changed everything. Olivia felt her heart racing. Around them, family, friends, and employees who had quietly gathered for the opening stood watching from a respectful distance. Ethan took a slow breath. For perhaps the first time in his life, the billionaire who could negotiate billion-dollar deals looked genuinely nervous. "You once told me that you felt like the substitute, like the person nobody was supposed to choose." He stepped closer. "You were wrong." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Ethan opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a beautiful engagement ring. The garden seemed to fall completely silent. "You were never the substitute, Olivia," he said. "You were always the one." Then he lowered himself onto one knee. "Will you marry me?" Olivia laughed through her tears before covering her mouth. For a moment, she could not find the words. Then she nodded. "Yes." The answer came instantly. "Yes, I will." Applause erupted around them. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a warm embrace. 1 year later, the studio had become one of the most beloved floral destinations in New York. The wedding took place in the very garden where Ethan proposed. White roses filled the air with fragrance. Friends and family surrounded them. And as Olivia walked toward the man waiting beneath the flower-covered arch, she could not help smiling at the strange chain of events that had brought her there. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories do not begin with perfect plans. Sometimes they begin with a mistake. And sometimes, if you are lucky enough, that mistake becomes forever